It's often expected that someone who endures the extraordinary hardship of being detained overseas, especially under politically charged and dangerous circumstances, would return with a deep sense of perspective, humility, and gratitude, particularly when their release involved significant diplomatic intervention from their home country. Brittney Griner, a professional athlete who found herself imprisoned in Russia and eventually freed through a highly publicized and controversial prisoner swap, has instead made headlines for a very different reason, voicing frustration not at the injustice she faced abroad, but at the newfound attention, noise, and energy that fans have brought to the WNBA since CaitlinClark's arrival. Her comments, particularly those suggesting that fan excitement could be linked to subtle racism, what she called light racism, sparked intense criticism and ultimately led to a very public backlash. Among the many who responded was sports commentator StephenASmith, who offered a blistering reality check, not through personal attacks, but by holding up the mirror of facts and common sense. Smith's commentary pointed out the absurdity of someone rescued through an international negotiation, one that involved exchanging a notorious arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, coming back and taking issue with the sound levels in basketball arenas. He didn't insult Griner, but rather questioned how someone who was once in a position where every basic freedom was stripped away could now complain about enthusiastic fans simply doing what sports fans do, cheering. The implications of her remarks go beyond one player's opinion. They touch on broader issues of gratitude, professionalism, and the growing pains of a league finally moving into the national spotlight. Griner described the crowds as loud, distracting, and even suggested that the presence of a cheering father and daughter might have had racial implications. That comment, vague and accusatory without evidence, opened the floodgates. It was not just a matter of opinion anymore. It became a reflection of a mindset that seemed to interpret fan passion as hostility rather than support. StephenA was not alone in pointing this out. Other analysts, athletes, and observers echoed the sentiment that Griner's reaction reflected a lack of understanding about the nature of professional sports and the responsibilities that come with public platforms. Fans in every major sports league bring energy, passion, and yes, noise. It's part of the experience, not a problem to be solved. Her remarks suggested she viewed the increase in attention as a negative force rather than an opportunity to grow the game and showcase the talent that has long gone underappreciated in the women's league. What made things worse was her response to criticism. Instead of acknowledging that her comments may have been poorly worded or misunderstood, she doubled down, lashing out at critics, accusing them of ignorance, and painting herself as a victim of unfair treatment. This kind of defensiveness only added fuel to the fire, especially in an era where athletes are expected to demonstrate accountability and adapt to criticism. It's not that Griner isn't entitled to her feelings. She absolutely is. But when those feelings become the centerpiece of a public narrative, and when they come at the very moment the league is finally gaining real momentum, it raises questions about priorities and awareness. What's particularly frustrating to many observers is the contrast between Griner and other athletes, including CaitlinClark herself, who has been under immense scrutiny, faced targeted fouls, and still handled her rise with poise and professionalism. While Clark has embraced the moment, Griner's response felt like resistance to change. And that change is crucial. For years, the WNBA has existed in relative obscurity compared to other major leagues. Now, with increased media coverage, sold-out arenas, and a surge in broadcast deals, the spotlight is finally turning toward women's basketball, and not everyone appears ready for it. Griner's discomfort with the crowd engagement seemed to signal a preference for the quieter days when expectations were lower and criticism was minimal. But that's not how professional sports evolve. With growth comes scrutiny, and with scrutiny comes the need for thicker skin, not deflection. StephenA's comments hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were grounded in the reality of how professional sports work and how public figures must conduct themselves. He reminded viewers that Griner's freedom came at a serious cost, one that involved trading away a dangerous international criminal. That alone should give anyone pause before framing their current discomfort in overly dramatic terms. In highlighting this, StephenA underscored how tone-deaf it is to shift focus from the triumph of freedom to the grievances of game day ambience. And the public took notice. Social media was ablaze with reactions, many agreeing that Griner's perspective felt misaligned with the moment. Even fellow athletes chose not to defend her, which spoke volumes. The silence from her peers indicated that the broader WNBA community understood the damage such comments could do to the league's image, especially at a time when public perception matters more than ever. The league is fighting for mainstream acceptance, and remarks that frame its growth as a problem rather than a breakthrough risk undermining years of progress. Additionally, Griner's mention of racial dynamics, especially without specific incidents or context, further muddied the waters. When terms like light racism are thrown around loosely, it can dilute the seriousness of real racial issues and create unnecessary division. It becomes harder to rally people around actual injustices when public figures invoke race without clear justification. StephenA highlighted this point as well, stressing the importance of using one's platform responsibly. He wasn't saying racism doesn't exist. He was saying that not every uncomfortable moment is necessarily racially motivated, and suggesting otherwise without evidence can do more harm than good. The entire episode also illustrates how social media can turn a comment into a crisis. Rather than letting the story die down, Griner's repeated posts and defensive statements kept it alive, ensuring that what might have been a one-day debate turned into a multi-day firestorm. This reaction, emotional, deflective, and lacking in self-awareness, only reinforced the very criticisms being leveled against her. He wasn't saying racism doesn't exist. He was saying that not every uncomfortable moment is necessarily racially motivated, and suggesting otherwise without evidence can do more harm than good. The entire episode also illustrates how social media can turn a comment into a crisis. Rather than letting the story die down, Griner's repeated posts and defensive statements kept it alive, ensuring that what might have been a one-day debate turned into a multi-day firestorm. This reaction, emotional, deflective, and lacking in self-awareness, only reinforced the very criticisms being leveled against her. For many, it became an example of how not to respond to public criticism. Instead of showing growth, introspection, or gratitude, the message sent was one of entitlement and victimhood. And that's unfortunate because Griner is undeniably talented and has the potential to be a positive force in the sport. But that potential is undermined when personal grievances take center stage over the game itself. Her story of survival, of return, of redemption could have been a powerful narrative of resilience. Instead, it became a case study in how public perception can quickly sour when gratitude is replaced by grievance. Going forward, the lesson here is clear. Athletes, especially those with high profiles, must recognize the weight their words carry. When you've been given a second chance through extraordinary means, you're not just representing yourself. You're representing every person who advocated for your return, every diplomat who negotiated on your behalf, every fan who supported your journey. Complaining about crowd noise, especially when it signals the sport's long-awaited breakthrough, risks alienating the very audience you need to succeed. The criticism Griner received wasn't about silencing her. It was about holding her to the same standard of accountability expected of every public figure. In the end, StephenASmith's remarks didn't come from a place of hostility, but from a desire to remind everyone, including Griner, of what's at stake and what's required when you're in the spotlight. The WNBA is growing, evolving, and finally gaining traction. This is the moment to embrace progress, not resent it. And for Brittney Griner, this could have been a moment to show how adversity leads to strength and wisdom. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about how easily goodwill can be squandered when self-awareness gives way to self-pity.